Hi guys, welcome to 8vbebop, where we talk about all things jazz, bass trombone, and jazz bass trombone. Co-hosted by myself, Gina Benalcazar, and Chris Glassman. This week's special guest is the legendary Max Seigel.
Bass trombonist Max Seigel has lived and worked in New York City since 2000. During that time, he has established himself as both a powerful soloist and a sought-after ensemble player. He has been featured by legendary trombonist Slide Hampton alongside Bob Brookmeyer, Benny Powell, Bill Watrous, and Steve Davis as a member of the Trombone All-Stars on stage at the Blue Note. Max performs frequently with Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, and the Mingus Big Band. He has also performed with Carla Bley, Bob Mintzer, John Faddis, Toshiko Akiyoshi at such venues as Berlin and the Iridium. Mr. Seigel is featured on Slide Hampton's Spirit of the Horn, appearing on recordings with Nancy Wilson, the Fresh Sound Jazz Orchestra, and Kendrick Oliver's New Life Jazz Orchestra. Commercially, he's gained experience playing in the pit of the Broadway productions of Cats and Lion King, as well as on the soundtrack recording for the motion picture SWAT.
As an active composer and arranger, he has had his works commissioned by Slide Hampton, Kendrick Oliver, Jeremy Pelt. Max has also had a passion for new music and can be heard both live and on recording collaboration with composers such as Justin Mullins, Frank Carlberg, Sharice Rogers, Jamie Begin, and Andrew Rethler. You can also read more about Mr. Seigel and view his discography and get in touch with him on his website, maxseigel.com. Let's get started.
Which only works if you have Flash, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. How are you doing, Mr. Seigel? What have you been up to this quarantine?
You know, this ain't my first road. No, I don't know. I have been trying to stay together. I don't know, keep it together during this whole thing. This is unprecedented, and, you know,
I think
been
we
playing
all
a lot of piano, I guess. Yeah,
Oh,
everybody, right? Yeah, so wondering what it's going to be like when we come back around into playing in public and stuff. Some buddies of mine are talking about, the Weather Vest group, we're talking about getting together and heading down to a park, you know, just to play, because we haven't played in however long. I don't know, I had the idea it would be awesome to have a quartets at like each intersection in Manhattan.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Just like, you know, one instrumentalist on each, you know, corner of the block, and like a 6-foot circle drawn around you, like nobody come close, whatever. Here's our Venmo tip thing.
Yeah. I imagine that you've seen the scene change so much, especially since you've been in here. Can you talk a little bit about how you think the scene is going to change after this quarantine, or the music business in general? I
don't know what's going to happen, you know. And I don't know that it has changed that much since I've been here. I kind of missed the whole recording times, or most of them anyway. And it's, you know, I think it's a different kind of scene now than it was then, or whatever. But I don't know what's going to happen after this. It's anybody's ball game, I think. I hope that everybody gets healthy and that it loosens up and people get to play music again for large audiences.
Yeah.
You know, or small audiences, any audiences, or each other.
Let's start with some of the questions that were submitted. So one of the questions that we get asked, it's an interesting question because it doesn't always apply, but I would love to hear just your...
Dependent.
Oh my God.
Oh, not that one, right?
No, but now we know. That was on there.
Yeah, that was on there. Yeah, no, I say dependent. I'm gonna go with dependent.
Okay.
Better for your tax returns.
All right, sounds good. Can you tell us why? Besides taxes.
Well, my first two horns were independent, just like yours. I had a Holton 181 and a Benge 290. When I moved to New York, I needed a new horn because my Benge was now worn out and dented from the road and not taken care of well. So I bought this Holton that was dependent, and I always liked those pictures from that the Edward Kleinhammer Art of the Trombone book of the bass trombone chapter. You know, it has a couple of pictures of, it's got a Holton and it's got a Reynolds Contempora, and I always liked the design. And then of course Dave had played that one, and I always liked that and thought that was awesome. And so I bought one of those from a guy named Bill Whitaker, who plays at Phantom of the Opera. Played that horn for 20 years, and then it also kind of wore out through 20 years, and also probably not taking great care of it. I'm not good at that, unfortunately. But I bought a new horn, an M&W, which is a copy of that Holton. It's the same wrap design, so it feels the same in my hands. The balance is 98% the same as that Holton, which makes it for a pretty smooth transition
That's
to a
great.
new horn. Anyway, dependent.
Yeah, I remember I was fortunate enough to get a lesson with you a little while back, and you had just gotten the horn, and you were talking about how much you liked it. We played a couple tunes on it, so that's cool. I'm glad to hear that you're continuing to love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have two other dependent ones also. I have a Tyne and a Shires, also from recent and not so recent. And the Shires is locked up in a horn case somewhere. I have no idea where, with the tour and all its gear. And I'm like, oh man, come on. Yeah, we're shut down. I don't know. We didn't mention this. I'm on the road with Michael Bublé right now, which is a fantastic job, and it's a great band and wonderful people to work with across the board. Anyway, they have road cases, and my horn was in a flight case inside the horn case, and it's out there because we didn't go back. And we're canceled through, I think, February of 2021. Yeah, 21. It's going to be weird.
You touched on a subject that we had a question about that we were going to ask you about already, which is,
sure.
If you can you talk a little bit just about what touring life is like, just because you're one of the musicians that we know that's very active in the touring scene.
Yeah, it ranges. I mean, this is the best scenario I've ever encountered, where we're in amazing hotels and there's catering on the job, and it's really great for every aspect of the thing. Other ones, it's like, you're with some buddies in a tiny car and you're going from place to place to place to place. My first gig was with the Dorsey Band. A guy named Bill Gammer in Cincinnati got me on the Dorsey Band. They needed a bass trombone player. Buddy Morrow leading the band. And so that was one-nighters for 6 months. Seriously, almost every night. There were hardly any nights off, maybe one per week or something if it was a really long drive. And that was like the old school thing. And then in that thing, it was, 2 people to a room, maybe 3 if you wanted to save some money. Pseudo crummy hotels. I mean, whatever. Some guys would stay on the bus if they really wanted to save money. That kind of thing. I don't think there are that many of those types of touring things around anymore, maybe. So in that way, the scene has changed.
Can you talk a little bit about more about what it's like touring specifically with Michael Bublé? I imagine that's like a completely different.
Yeah, it's totally new to me. They flew us all down to Florida to a soundstage, which is like this crazy big place. It's like the third largest place in the United States, like third largest building facility next to NASA and something else. Yeah, it's crazy. And it's like sound stages. So it's like one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. And one of them had like all the monster truck stuff. Like that was one ginormous warehouse and mechanics workshop and stuff. And one was like all the like Disney on Ice, like Ice Capade production stuff, and one was like rock stuff where we were, and one was, you name it, and maybe they do movies in there too, I don't know. So they flew us down to that place, and we had rehearsals like a week, and they build this ginormous stage. It's about 100 people in the crew, I think. No, maybe 70 people in the crew. Between the band and the management, it's maybe 30 people on top of that. So it's about 100 people total in the whole moving parts. So the first, there's like a safety thing where everybody learns about the moving parts of the stage and where you're going to be seated and how to be careful and don't do this, don't do that. It's okay to do this. It's okay to do that. And then a tech rehearsal where it was like, wiring up. We use inner ear monitors. They didn't work out for me so well, so I use headphones, but all the other guys I think are using, and the ladies in the string section are using inner ear monitors. So that was like a day was like that. So then it was rehearsals. Like the band had a rehearsal day, maybe 2 or 3 rehearsal days, and then Michael showed up for the last day and a half or something, and then that was it, and then we hit the road. And it's all in arenas, sports arenas, like hockey rinks or basketball courts or, whatever indoor, like Madison Square Garden type of thing. So it's interesting to be in those, like all of the different ones. Like in the center, they're basically the same, but they all have this like crazy maze to get around and trying to figure all that out and stuff. The band travels by tour buses. There's, let me think, about 11 tour buses and maybe like 19 semi trucks that carry all the gear. That's also really intense. I've never been part of something that large and crazy. It's not crazy, but it's large. It's bizarre. The tour buses are like 12 people to a bus, or maybe it's 11 because the driver gets a bunk as well. There's 12 bunks on the bus. We go around the country, and we were just in Australia. That was the last leg, was New Zealand and Australia, and that was really awesome. I never thought I would ever make it there, and it was really wonderful to be there and see that place. And we saw a sunset on the Indian Ocean. I'm like, wow, the Indian Ocean. Like I read about that in geography class, and like grade school or something.
Quick follow-up question with that too. Do you have to make any specific musical considerations when you have to play in a venue like an arena?
Musical considerations. The music is pretty straight ahead in the fashion of a Sinatra type of gig, or there are some rock tunes, some pop rock tunes, but it's pretty straight ahead for the most part. The consideration is playing section, day-to-day life. That's hard, man. Like doing the same thing every night. And there's no like improvisation for three of the trombones. The second trombone is Josh Brown. He gets to go out. First of all, the section is Nick Vianas on lead, Josh Brown on second, and Tim Schneider on third, me on the bottom. So they have like a small band that happens way out in the center of the arena, and he gets a couple of maybe 16 bars of solo or something, but that's it for the whole night for the trombones. The music is all about the section, and it's all about playing the same thing every night and being as on top of it as possible, given travel circumstances or, road wear, or, we did 3 in a row and this is the third one and everybody's super tired. But you come up there and that's what the gig is about. It's not super hard. The hardest thing in the bass trombone book is a gliss from F to low B flat, which isn't really a possible gliss or something. It's kind of a funny way, but it starts off the tune or whatever. So he counts it off and it's like, that's like the big bass trombone moment. And I've missed it a couple times because I didn't hear him count off because he was off his mic, or, whatever, or I biffed it, and it's always just like, you had one job. I mean, I didn't. I have lots of other jobs. Anyway, the section sounds awesome. Playing with these guys is amazing. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
People talk about show chops or tour chops. How do you keep up with that? Because
that's
these are
thing
like
too.
long runs of shows.
I mean, that's what it's like. I mean, the thing about it is you're playing the same thing every day. It's sort of like a Broadway show in the same thing. Like if you're in a pit and you're playing the show every day, that's what your face kind of learns how to do. And then maybe other things that you might want to do are not easy anymore. Stiffness or something happens because you're just doing that same thing every day. Yeah, if we do 3 in a row, it hurts. I mean, because by the end of the show's like an hour and a half, maybe. There's only a couple that are subtle. Like most of them are you're blowing, full on. There's a couple of ballads that are pretty subtle, but everything else is, after 3, it's like, like I feel for the trumpets, and then to keep that going, luckily the arenas are huge. So there's no lack of practice space or warm up space or, resetting your face space, or you can go outside in the parking lot and the parking lot's equally huge or whatever, but it never feels like you're stepping on toes or whatever. There's always a place you can go off and take care of that kind of thing. Maintenance,
One of the questions that we get asked is if you could talk about your transition into jazz and what that was like for you, if there was a transition.
Sure. I don't think there was a transition like that. I didn't come from it's kind of weird. I started out as a pianist. I studied piano with a classical pianist named Patricia Griffith, and she, taught me how to sight read and harmony, basic harmony. I studied jazz with her husband, who plays upright bass and accordion. His name's Ben, and he kind of taught me jazz harmony. He showed me lead sheets for the first time and like simple tunes. And so I was like kind of trying to figure that out, but I was never a very good pianist, but I liked to do it. In middle school band, I guess I had a trombone, and then when I got to high school, I played trombone a little bit in middle school band, like 1 year or something, but I hadn't really figured that out, and I still like to play piano more, so I wasn't really thinking about it. But then in high school, I went to an art school called School for Creative and Performing Arts in Cincinnati, and the computer misscheduled all the piano majors in symphonic wind band. So like 30 extra kids showed up the first day of class, and the band director is a guy named Steve Berry. He's like, hey, do any of you play piano? And half the class raises their hand. He's like, all right, there's been this computer foul up and you don't have to be here, but before you leave, do any of you play wind instruments? And then like half those hands go down, and then my hand's still up, and he goes around the room like, what do you play or whatever, and some instruments he didn't need. He's like, well, I don't need any of those, whatever, I do need that. And then I said, I play a little bit of trombone. He's like, I need, we need that. So I played trombone in the wind band, which was way more fun at the high school level, and you're playing a lot more fun stuff. But I never had any high chops, so I was always in the bottom of the section. And eventually we played this Lord of the Rings tune, which needed a bass trombone. So they hand out the parts, and the third trombone doesn't say third trombone, it says bass trombone. I was like, what is that? he's like, oh, hang on a second. And he goes in the instrument thing and pulls out that Holton 181 I was talking about. And I was like, wow, this has a slide and button. It's like, this is amazing. And so then I was hooked, from then. But anyway, there I studied with a lady named Amy Campbell and Mark Fields. And Mark Fields also taught at the university there. So I went on to Cincinnati Conservatory and studied with him for a year and a half. And he used to play with Ray Charles' band, and he plays all around Cincinnati, and he's excellent local legend.
So how old were you when you started playing? Like when you said you started learning harmony?
I mean, middle school. It wasn't like advanced harmony or anything, just traditional major, minor, augmented, diminished, basic, whatever. I had more gumption than I had knowledge or whatever. Like, it was I still had the drive. And actually, I studied piano at the Creative and Performing Arts School too with a guy named Philip Burkhead. And he's an amazing jazz pianist there. And I studied with him for a couple of years, I think.
I got a quick follow-up for you, actually. And that is, so many musicians talk about the importance of playing and learning piano. And I would just be interested. It's interesting because you started on piano. So I would love to hear how you feel like the piano has informed your trombone playing. Improvising, whatever, it doesn't matter. Or your writing or anything. I think everything, you can see everything. When you're looking at the keyboard, you see how harmony works. You can see a chord. If you're just dealing with the trombone, you're just dealing with one note, and it's hard to conceptualize. I think probably, I'm not sure, but I think it's probably hard to conceptualize the actual passing of the thing. Like, I don't know, if you're playing bebop and you're playing a linear thing and you're outlining a chord structure or whatever, it's like, I don't know, how do you learn that? You do arpeggios and then you do scales and all that stuff. And it's just a different thing to sit down and go doing, and there's all the notes at one time, and actually hear doing, like all of it. So I think that's why it's so important, because if you're just going honk, it's hard to hear the full thing. And that's why they stress that. And it's definitely helped me in immeasurable ways, especially writing too, talking about composition and arranging and stuff, like seeing the vertical.
Can you talk to us about what you think makes like a well-rounded bass trombonist or a well-rounded musician?
Be able to do everything that you are required to do in any situation. I guess that would be the thing, play your instrument well, in tune, in time. In terms of trombone, sound is super important. Individuality, if you're talking about musicianship, like, I think it's really important to find your own path to the thing. I don't know. That's a hard one to talk about because everybody's coming from somewhere different, and it's up to that person to like actually hone in on what it is that makes them light up. Spit valves help. Writing and arranging is cool too. Writing and arranging is awesome. It's so much fun for me. And I don't know, like if you go to school for a degree in trombone, you might not necessarily do much of that for the performance degree. It's like you might barely scrape the tip of the iceberg or whatever. But I think it's a lot of fun. And it's like right now I have a group. It's me and a buddy. We got together. Mike Lorman is tenor trombonist, and we lived here for about 5 or 6 years as roommates. And he was coming from the symphonic side of the coin, and I was coming from the jazz side of the coin. And we would play in the house constantly, duets, quartets, quintets, whatever, music all the time. We didn't really play gigs together because he would be doing orchestra stuff and I would be doing big bands or whatever. And so finally, about maybe 8 years ago or something, I'm not sure how long we've been playing with that group, but he's like, hey, we should probably play together. And I'm like, yeah, we should. And so, we decided we didn't want to do a trombone quartet because it'd been done a zillion times and way better than us, or way better than we thought we could do it. And same thing with the brass quintet. Like, it's been done a zillion times and probably way better than we could do it. So we decided to pick other instruments, and he's tenor and I'm bass, so we decided a choir would work, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And so soprano and alto saxophones was our natural choice, although now we have those two fellows double on flute and clarinet. So it's Jay Ratman on soprano sax and clarinet, and Aaron Irwin on alto sax and flute, and Mike Lorman and myself. And so writing for that has been so much fun for all four of us. Like, we all contribute pieces. It's something that maybe you might not even get play. We don't get together that often. Just the act of writing it is fun. And then when you finally get together, and that's like a portable unit, like 4 people can easily get in a car and go somewhere, do a gig somewhere pretty close. We're talking about touring. It's a super portable thing, and it's easy for us to meet up. We all live in the city, and there's a couple of places we rehearse. Jay's wife Janet works at a church. She's a music director at a church, and they've worked out a really nice agreement with us to let us rehearse there sometimes. So we meet there. It's near Fat Cat, but it's nice because you write this thing, and we might not be thinking about it now, and then like 6 months later, or 3 months later, whatever, the next time we get to play, you get it played, and it's like, oh man, I remember all this, and it's like it was really fun, the whole project. I think especially on the orchestral side of the coin, they might not have as much of that going on in a degree, but I'm not sure. That's just a theory. I don't know.
Can you talk a little bit about how your compositional voice was influenced by your instrument? So how the trombone has sort of affected how you write?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I hear everything pretty low. That Siphonophore record, it's a choir of bass trombone, 6 bass trombones and 6 baritone saxes, and so everything's pretty low. The highest note played by a bass trombone is a D flat, like Bolero D flat, which is Jeff Nelson, by the way. And the lowest note, also Jeff Nelson, is the double pedal C. So he gets the award on both of those. But it's written really low. I mean, but then the saxophones kind of covered the top part for me of that. But, the harmony's pretty low for a lot of it. But yeah, that's how, because I don't know, I think of middle C and below or something.
Can you talk a little bit about the bass trombone as an improvisational instrument?
It's totally cool to improvise on a bass trombone. I think it's totally awesome. I mean, people have done it and are doing it, and it's happening. It's just now kind of happening a lot more. I think it was like rarity, because I think most bass trombonists came from traditionally the classical side of the coin, and maybe they weren't, they didn't, I don't know, who knows? It wasn't required of them. Like Dave Taylor does it all the time. Reichenbach does it all the time. There's a guy here in New York, Tim Newman, Jeff Nelson. The two of you, like, come on, it's happening all the time. But it seems like it's a new kind of thing for bass trombone, maybe just because of that kind of thing or whatever. Maybe it's because of the jazz schools, and then now it's like more integrated into the thing.
It doesn't seem like the instrument gets in your way. You play it just like it's an improvisational instrument. Can you talk about how you went about learning the language?
Well, I mean, I studied with Mark Fields at University of Cincinnati, and a couple of years before that, and Philip Burkhead, the pianist. Like when I studied with him, he had me do transcriptions. That was the first time I ever did a transcription, and they were on piano. And then the first time I ever did one on trombone was Mark. Like, I don't think he knew what to do with me as a bass trombonist, because he was a tenor trombonist, and all his students were tenor trombone. He's like, well, maybe you should transcribe a bass, like an upright bass, because I can play down there. So the first thing he had me transcribe was off of Slides, the original World of Trombones record from the 70s. And it was the bass solo, Ray Drummond on Con Alma, which is in E, right? Or whatever. So it's it's low B natural is the very first note. You know what I mean? And yeah. So just getting a low B out is, starting with something like, all right, we got to work on this until it's happening. Low B. So that was how that started working. And he assigned me a bunch of other transcriptions. And then from then I wanted to transcribe stuff, and I had always had affinity for piano players. So I transcribed a couple of Keith Jarrett solos and some other pianists. There's a Jimmy Heath solo, Slides dedicated to Diz record that won at the Vanguard. But yeah, that's how that happened. And so transcribing, that's how you learn the language. And then when I came to Manhattan School to study with Dave, I didn't have technical facility. I just kind of knew that side of the thing. Like, I never was very good at technique. And he was like, kid, low B natural, And so for like 2 years, we just did technique stuff, foundation type of work. And then we got to music. It was like, you're not ready for music until you're ready for that. And so I studied with him for about 5 years, and then my last year there I was with John Mosca in the master's degree, and he also had me do some transcriptions. So transcribe. Yeah.
You talk about a lot of really amazing names, right? What is it like to have played with, for example, Slide Hampton, like your experience with Slide? In that record that we played at the beginning of this was Slide, and your first transcription was off the Slide record before that.
It was amazing. I met Slide. Doug invited me when I first moved to New York. Doug Proviance, who helped me out with countless things in my career, he invited me to Carnegie Hall. They used to have Carnegie Hall Jazz Band led by John Faddis, and Slide wrote a lot, if not all the charts, but a lot of them. He wrote for the band and played in the band too. So they were having a rehearsal, and Doug, or maybe it was a sound check, must have been a sound check, because it was, in Carnegie Hall. And so I went there and met him on the break, hearing this incredible band play and of all my heroes, and I got to meet him backstage, and he's like, "You got your horn?" I had my horn with me and everything. He's like, "Come on, play." And so he played, I think, Solar, or I don't remember what song, but like we played through a tune, just the two of us trading and chorus by chorus, and it was really awesome. And then not too long after that, he invited me to play with the World of Trombones, because he was going to make that new record. It's kind of weird the way it happens. The rehearsals were happening like every couple weeks, but with no real discernible order to the personnel or anything. Like, it was like he just would call a rehearsal and you'd show up and there'd be 4 new charts or 3 or whatever, and it would be at 16, or how many was it, 12 trombones on that one, plus him and Watchers out front. And so it would be like ex musicians, ex trombonists, and then the next 2 weeks it would be, because whoever could do it, and whoever couldn't do it couldn't do it. Like, one, I remember sitting next to Curtis Fuller. He was sitting right here. He was like on the last tenor trombone next to the bass trombones. I was like, like, that's Curtis Fuller, and Slide is right in front of me, and Benny Powell is over here on the left. It was amazing. Yeah. And he's always been so nice to me and helpful, and we go out to his house. He lives out in one of the Oranges, I think it's South Orange, maybe. He lives in a place now and that has like a communal room, like a condo kind of place, but it has like a communal room. Maybe have you all been out there? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So every once in a while he has things, same thing. It's like he'll call a rehearsal or a jam session or whatever, and whoever can make it makes it. And,
mm-hmm. You're also one of the few bass trombonists that I know of that's played with Jazz at Lincoln Center. Is there any chance you could talk about that a little bit? I know they're traditionally a 3-trombone band, so I'd love to hear.
Yeah, they are. The very first time I played with them was not too long after I'd moved here, and it was a really random left field call from Andre Hayward, the third. He was then the 3rd trombonist. Yeah, it was Ron and Vince and Andre. And Andre called me kind of out of the blue and was like, "Hey man, can you make a rehearsal at 2 o'clock or whatever?" Like, all these things start with like, "Hey man, can you make?" It's like kind of a last minute thing. That's how it starts. And it's like, okay, yeah, sure, of course. And so it was at the old Carol's studios, and I show up, and there's the band. Like, I sit down and where I'm supposed to sit down, and we read through the music. It was some kind of concert. It's been so long now, I don't remember who the guest performers were, but it was like a themed concert of like I think it was all Brazilian musicians, as I recall, and it was like and added like 4 percussionists and guitar players. Maybe it was flamenco. This has been a while. Anyway, I might be merging these. It was like a themed concert. Everything about it was super professional. The copy work is immaculate. There's like nothing is in question. The space that you're in is really comfortable. Everybody's super relaxed. Everybody's really nice. All those musicians are super nice and welcoming and everything. And then they play. And it's like, you're like, wow. It's like a roller coaster ride or something. And I remember in one in particular, because the reason that I remember I'd only heard Winton on recordings. I'd never heard him live before. And he played this feature piece with a guitarist, and it was like a Tico Tico type of thing. Right? It was, I don't know if it was that one, but it was a similar style and notey piece on guitar. And he was doubling the guitar maybe with a cup unit. And like, so the rehearsal ends and everybody's starting to clear out. Everybody's packing up all their stuff. And he goes over there with the guitarist. There's 2 of them. And they start rehearsing this thing. And it's like, wow. Like I had never heard that acoustically like that before. Like that pristine amazingness. Yeah, the whole thing. And so from then, every once in a while they'll call me maybe once a year as a bass trombonist because they'll need one. Or like one time the 2 of us for a Kenton concert. What else? There was a Gil Evans one. It was like half Gil. It was weird. It was like a West Coast concert. So it was like a little bit of probably merging all these together at this point. But like I feel like they did the Birth of the Cool in the first half. And then maybe it was large ensemble Gil the second half. It wasn't West Coast. Christian McBride did a concert. Chick Corea did a concert. Pretty amazing also. Like he just wrote 1 tune with a bass trombone. So they hired me to come down for 1 tune. And he had written it for like the MIT big band or something like that. And this was his first time hearing the piece was with Winton's band. That's all been amazing.
Does that happen a lot where you'll get called in for just like a few tracks, or usually when they call you in, is it like a whole show of bass trombone parts?
Usually it'll usually be half a concert or something like that. And anymore, it doesn't really happen that much because they primarily write their own arrangements as of recently, and they write for the band. They don't write for me. They write for themselves. So it doesn't happen as often anymore. Sometimes it happens in the summer when they do the high school jazz competition. Like they do this thing, essentially Ellington competition, where they make a recording for the next year's competition for the band leaders to hear the charts and for the individual players. And I think the last time I did it, they had a camera on every single player. So there's like a camera like right here. And like there's the chart on the, it's like it was really kind of unnerving. I'd never done that before. They do that every year, and so whatever charts they use of those that might have a fourth part, sometimes they call me for that, but not all the time. So I don't know. Same thing. I did a couple concerts with the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra too, but that was subbing for Earl McIntyre. But I think that might have been like a half a concert or something as well. So things like that happen sometimes.
You've played with the Roy Hargrove Big Band, and on his album Emergence, you're playing on that record. You even have an arrangement. My Funny Valentine is your arrangement, correct? Can you talk about that whole experience?
Well, that was amazing. Yeah, start to finish. It was amazing. I didn't have much of a close contact with Roy. Personally, he's kind of a quiet guy, or he seemed like that to me, and I didn't talk to him a whole bunch of times over the years, but it was so amazing to hear him play and the way he led the band. Like, it's unbelievable. And the sound that band gets also is unbelievable. The saxophone section is holy cow, right? And the trombone section and the trumpet section, and the way the writing works, they're screaming, and the energy of the band itself is unbelievable. One time we played in Central Park, we played that summer stage thing that they do in Central Park, and it was raining. Not just like a light rain, like super drench, crazy rain. And we started playing, and we're like, oh man, all these people are gonna leave. Like, nobody left. The intermission came around, and he didn't take the intermission. We just kept going through it. And by the end of it, it was like he played way over the time they allowed him. Like, we all were just having such an amazing time and experience, and the audience was so connected, even though they were getting buckets and buckets and buckets of rain poured on them. It's unbelievable. And that kind of energy, and also rare. We played a lot of times at the Jazz Gallery too. That was his space. I think still running in some capacity. We did one concert since he passed, which has been maybe a couple months now, or 3 or 4 months. Well, more than that. That type of musician is rare and really amazing.
One thing I love about that band and the sound of that band is that, I'm not trying to flatter you too much, but when I listen to the recordings, there's just like, I call it the Max Seigel bomb drop. It's just every once in a while, there'll just be a moment. It's just like, boom. It's just that. Yeah. Well, I call it.
Let me tell you about that record. One of the days, I have a buddy out in California. I won't name him, but he is amazing as a jazz trombone player and an amazing friend. Although I haven't seen him for years, but he's a real good dude. I had never inhaled, shall we say. And we went out there, and I called some of the other fellows in the band and was going to hang out with this guy, and they all knew him too. And so we all hung out. This is like the night after it was 2 days in the studio at Capitol. And so we did the first day, and then I called him that afternoon, left a message, whatever. And he called me back at, I don't know, like 4 a.m, something crazy. I was sleeping. I woke up like, oh, hey man, how you doing? Like, he's like, hey, you want to hang out? I'm like, well, I'm sleeping, but sure, He's like, well, I got my girlfriend's car until 9, so I'll come to your hotel. We'll hang. Like, okay, cool. I'll call the other, because the other trombone players wanted to hang out with him too. And so I left messages for everybody else. Only one of them woke up. And so he gets to our hotel at like 5 a.m. We go, get in his car, drive to a nearby diner that is not up to his standards for some reason. And we get back in the car, and we go to a bagel shop that doesn't open till 6. And we sit there in the car, and we're just, shooting shit, whatever. And he rolls just probably the biggest joint I've ever seen. And we went to town, and I'm like, man, I don't think this is working on me, He's like, man, you're high, you don't even know it. And I'm like, whatever. And so we go back to the hotel with our bagels, and we sit by the pool, and we had a really nice time talking. And then I went back to my room. He had to go get his girlfriend and get her the car so she'd go to work. So he left at like 9 or something. And I sit down on the bed in my hotel, and turn on the TV and it's Looney Tunes. And it is the funniest Looney Tunes I've ever seen. And like my entire head, my hair feels like it's standing on end, and I can feel each single follicle, even though there's not hardly any of it. There was a little bit more then. And so I called him up and I'm like, man, I'm high. He's like, yeah, I told you. And so the second day of recording, I mean, I think I was playing way too loud anyway, just because the energy of the band and, you know, but that second day, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but it was definitely too much. But we had a great time. So
amazing.
Anyway,
So good.
I miss him. Yeah.
You are one of the most influential voices when it comes to like improvising on the bass trombone. And I'm just curious, were you aware that it would happen / are you aware of it now?
No and no. There's lots of people that do this. You two kick butt at this. Like, you know, there's lots of people. It's not like a thing like that. It's just, I don't know. And I have my super weaknesses too. So it's like, you just keep working on it and get better. Hope it gets better. Keep trying to make it better.
Did you imagine the role of the instrument would change so much?
I don't think it has. It's not. It's the same thing. It's just maybe more people are open to hearing it or something. I mean, we still do the same function. It's not, the function didn't change. It's just like now maybe like, hey, you know, give Gina some, you know, give Chris some, give whoever some. I think earlier it was coming from the instrument itself was coming from the classical side of the coin. So maybe it just wasn't thought of or something, you know, like Cliff Heather. I don't know what his background was. I don't think there's any recorded solos of him playing a solo in Thad's band for whatever reason. It's not that he couldn't do it. He just probably never thought to do it, you know, like George Roberts. I don't think he ever thought to do it. It's like he played melodies and that's what he did. It was like, that was that time. Now it's like, well, why not do it, you know? Yeah, and Dave playing solos with the Mingus band or with Bob Minster's band or whatever, you know, like it's a thing, you know? Reichenbach with Buddy Rich, or I don't know what he does out there. I'm sure he does a million things out there with people. It's a thing, you know? So keep going.
A thing that we hear a lot from bass trombonists that are either, you know, worried about starting improvising, is that they say a lot that, oh, well, the instrument is not designed to improvise. It's hard to play in the bebop style on bass trombone. And we'd love to hear your thoughts about either if you feel like you had to overcome it or if you just ignored it or what you did.
No, I think the hardest part is the frequency, the muddy part. Like if you have a bass and say a guitar and say a piano and a bass trombone, and they're all trying to interact, and maybe a tom-tom, you know, a low or mid-tom, like it's just hard to cut through that. Like that isn't easy to do. The bass trombone kind of, it seems to be honkier the lower you go, right? Honk, 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 honk. And that is cuttier, like more direct, but it's not as like pretty sounding, maybe. I mean, it is. It's pretty in its own way, but you know, maybe that's the thing. But like with this record, Bluebird, the hardest part was especially only if it was muted, really, was the you know, mixing of the guitar level with the bass level, and maybe the tom-tom level, maybe not so much that. But if I was in a specific register, then it would all kind of cancel each other out, and you don't hear it. It just doesn't come through. I think that's the hardest part, especially, and in a big band, like if you're playing in a big band, almost always the time that they give a bass trombone a solo is at the end of the set. So you've been, you know, pow, 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 like, you know, holding up the thing, doing the job the whole way through. And then it's like, hey, do something artistic and awesome. And it's like, well, I'm kind of out of gas here, you know, like I used it for all the honky stuff, you know, or whatever. So that also makes it hard, I think. So it's like a pacing issue or something, but it's definitely cool.
I know Gina and I have done some recording, but on the record that I was recording, that was what I loved about your quartet record, is I could actually hear the bass trombone very clearly when you're soloing, like regardless of the register. And I was actually going to send you a message.
Well, that's the studio atmosphere. Yeah.
I was like, I was just shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, you can actually
it's
really
studio
hear it.
atmosphere. It's like, yeah, we could tweak stuff that works. I mean, the hardest one was that Please Let Me Forget one with the Buzzy mute. I mean, he's awesome. Paul Wycliffe was the engineer, and he's super awesome. It wasn't hard. It was just, like he did it one way, and I'm like, hey, Paul, can you help me out with the frequency thing here and there? Whatever, that's it. Paul Wycliffe, he's super awesome. Skyline Audio, I think. Skyline Productions. But yeah, that's definitely difficult in any, I think, setting, is that part. Like you're limited to either honking full on only honk, like anything, that's what I mean, is like anything subtle you do that might be not full volume is probably not going to make it through the thump of a bass or a twang of guitar, or I'm not talking about the studio, I mean in a live setting, you're playing the big band or whatever, somebody gives you a solo and there's a piano player plays this huge chord, whatever's down here in the left hand is going to make it hard for you to get through unless they are very responsive, which hopefully they are, but that's just one of the challenges.
Could you talk a little bit more about your experience in the studio, since we kind of are grazing over that topic? So, because you've recorded records on your own, you've been in there with like trombone, the trombone ensemble with Slide, or that was a live concert, right?
That was a live thing with one studio day after the fact. Like that track is live. Some of the other ones, we did a studio day at the end to like repair bad endings or bad starts or whatever. I have the mini discs of all of that, but I don't know how to get them off a mini disc. Anyway, there's some amazing stuff in there too. Do
you have any projects in the works right now?
Well, I got a string project that I started when my daughter was born. That was kind of like, okay, I'm not going to get much free time, so I'm just going to start working on this thing that hopefully will happen at some point. And I have like 6 charts done, which I was hoping to get 10, so eventually I'll do 4 more, hopefully. I should be doing them now. I have all the time that I need right now, but it's also difficult. But yeah, that's on the back burner. It's for a full, string ensemble, and there's a harp part and a guitar part and alto flute part, and then there's parts for Weather Vest on 1 or 2 tunes. I think there's 2 tunes. So that'll be like the little chamber thing on the side of the string band. But yeah, that's it for that. And then there's always Weather Vest stuff. Like I started working on an arrangement for them the other night. I only got about 4 bars in, but I'll get there.
I feel like this would be a good transition into one of the tracks from Siphonophore.
Siphonophore, yeah, sure.
Siphonophore, the accent over there.
Yeah.
Siphonophore.
6 bass trombones on this. Jeff Nelson playing lead bass trombone. Chris Olness, lead bass trombone. Chris Olness, Doug Purviance, Dave Taylor, Jack Schatz, and Dale Turk. Oh, this is Dan Peck on the solo tuba, by the way.
Nice. Here, Amazing.
amazing.
Double
Yeah.
pedal G on tuba. Yeah.
Ooh, I
Yeah,
love it.
Dan. Pick.
One thing I love about that piece is that honestly, it reminds me of Stephen Riley's In C, because you're sort of like switching harmonic. Like I don't know, I don't know why I was thinking about it, but this tuba is sort of like singing on top with this beautiful melody, and then you get everybody on bottom, and I could tell it's sort of switching harmonic contents between like different sort of key tonal center sounds. So I was interested to hear what you think was inspiring that sort of juxtaposition, you know, because that's like a big key part of that piece, I think, is that there's like sort of the one texture on bottom, and there's the tuba singing on top. Unless I
played that piece one time, but I wasn't thinking about that piece for sure.
Okay, probably. Fair enough. Sorry, that's a really complicated question.
No, it's okay. That piece is based on Amazing Grace. It's 2 choruses long, but it goes by super slow. The idea was for it to be like Seurat. You know, you look at those paintings and they're like little dots. And then it adds up to Amazing Grace, you know, the trombone player that he did for those boat paintings, like those ones. But anyway, it's supposed to be pixelated or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. That's it. And then a double pedal G at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just to remind everybody that this is called Amaze in G. So I just think that clever. That title is clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Womp womp. Womp womp womp.
I get it.
Can you talk about the title of the record a little bit? We talked about it a little earlier, but I wanted to talk about it on the air. Siphonophore?
A siphonophore is a colonial organism, which means that it's a thing, but it's made up of other things that can't exist on their own, right? So it's a colony of baritone saxophones, a colony of bass trombones, and then a colony of like other instruments like the tuba and the other things that happen in the record. So like a jellyfish is sort of one of those things. It has an organism that makes it move, like the motion, that's all it does. And it has an organism that eats, that like feeds it. That's all that does. And then it has an organism that stings, and that's all that does. And that stings the food so that it can eat the food or whatever. But like they don't exist on their own. They all have to be part of the same thing. And same thing with baritones and bass trombones. We rarely exist on our own. It's usually in the context of a big band. So that was the idea. That cover art is by my sister, Nellie Seigel. Super beautiful paper collage, which was really hard to photograph. We did our best there. And then she also did the cover art on the new one, the Bluebird, the glass mosaic that she did as the cover of the new one.
Amazing.
Yeah, Nellie. I forgot to say hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. We get this question every week, but we got the question and we got a follow-up for the question. And the question is, what is your bucket list gig, whether you've played it or not?
Well, I mean, playing with Roy is a bucket list gig. That was unbelievable and amazing. Playing with Linton was a bucket list gig. I've had a lot of them. Playing with the Vanguard Band is a super huge bucket list gig. You know, subbing for Douglas there is awesome. That was one of the last gigs I did before this quarantine happened. Was I subbed on third trombone, which is very rare for me, but it was awesome. Got to sit next to Doug. It was great. And Sarah Jacobino and Mark Patterson. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Follow-up question. These are both by like Eric Gottsman. He said, can you talk about as much as you can about a funny gig snafu moment where something just went like completely awry?
Awry? In what way?
He just said funniest.
Like awry?
Yeah, exactly. He's just said a funny snafu moment from a gig.
I don't know. Maybe no. I don't know.
Fair enough.
I can't think of a snafu. I mean, I'm sure they've happened all over the place. I just don't think about them. I don't know.
Do you have any tips for young bass trombonists that are having? Because one of the things that's a very consistent
snafus.
Topic is.
I just came up with it.
Okay.
Because you said tips. Because you said tips, and it made me think about pits, which made me think about Broadway. I've definitely had snafus happen in the pit in Broadway many times, and because I'm always a substitute. I've never had my own show or anything. I've always subbed for people. Jeff Nelson, Jen Wharton, Jack Schatz, Doug Proviance for Cats, Chris Olness. Lots of snafus there, but like they do the same thing every night. And same thing with the Bublé band. I'm sure I've had snafus there too, but when you do the same thing every night, like the snafu thing, it's like, oh, sorry, I biffed it, like I'll get it next time, or, it's like that happens, but you don't hold on to them,
One of the biggest things with bass trombonists when they start thinking about jazz is they don't know where to start or how to even approach it. Do you have any tips for young up and coming bass trombonists who are trying to start getting into jazz?
I don't know. Transcribe, listen to a lot. I mean, I have more listened to than I can actually execute on the horn or whatever. Like, I think that's definitely, you need that kind of bass. That's where the style comes from too. I mean, if you've never done it before, if you're coming from the orchestral side of the coin and you've never done it before, the style comes from listening to all the recordings and matching the articulations or the particular vibrato or the inflection or the change in dynamics or the whatever else you can think, growl, the attack, like all that stuff. That's how you got to do it. Support your local record store. Go there, because you may be going there to find one thing, but you'll come out of there with like 3 things that you weren't trying to find before the whole iTunes thing. I still went to record stores. I don't think YouTube was around. Maybe that was just starting. I don't know. But like, I went to record stores for like the bulk of my whole musical collection, minus bootleg stuff or whatever. And you go to the record store like, oh, okay, so-and-so has a new record and you want to get that record. Oh, it's like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to get the record. Oh, but wait, look at this other record I never saw that same person made. You know, maybe you're asking to see something and the store person helps you go through the thing and they're like, oh, we don't have any, but if you like that, you might like this. Like, it was a real person. It wasn't like a, hey, if you like this, click here, you might like that. It was a real person. Go to record stores. I had a couple of students that, like, I tried to explain that to them and they're like, well, why would I go to a record store? It's like, well, because you don't know what you're going to come out with. Like, the uncertainty of it. Like, I don't know, YouTube is cool and I like it and it's awesome and everything and it's a great utility or whatever you call it. But going to the record stores is awesome. Like in Tokyo, man, Tokyo has the best record shops I've ever seen. You go there and like there's a place called Disc Union, and I think they still have Tower too, but I always go to Disc Union. And Disc Union has like their jazz, well, they have one in Shibuya, which is like, I think it's Shibuya or Shinjuku, I can't remember. It's in one of the shopping districts and it's 3 floors and it's all jazz, right? So you go in on the ground floor. The first time I ever went there, I went in on the ground floor and that's like all the new stuff and it's all broken down by instrument. So you go to the trombone section, there's 300 trombone players all organized by their last name or whatever instrument you're looking for. And then the second floor was all the new stuff on the labels. So it was all Verve. It was organized by label. So here's all the new Blue Note stuff. Here's all the new Verve stuff. Here's all the new MRC stuff, whatever the labels are. And then the top floor was all used. And the same thing, it was also broken down by instrument. I found several of my buddies' records that live in Brooklyn that are on a relatively small label. I don't know, maybe it's probably a big label now, but then it was not as popular as it is now. Seeing their record in a record shop in Tokyo, like 20 copies, forward facing, was like huge to me. Like that doesn't happen in the US like that anymore. It's hard, you know, so that's why I support your record store, because you can go in there and find something that you weren't looking for.
I love this because you just started talking about international traveling a little bit. What's, as a musician or a person, what's one of the favorite destinations you've ever been to?
Well, Australia and New Zealand were pretty amazing. That was this past couple of months. But my favorite so far has been the Azores. I don't know if you've ever been there. They're islands in between us and Portugal. So they're kind of like in the Atlantic. And they're like far enough north that they're not hot and far enough south that they're not cold, maybe. And they're volcanic. I went there with the Dorsey band. We were on a cruise ship. It was a long time ago. I just remember it being totally amazing to see a volcano that had gone off in the 60s and was like totally desolate, mountain desolate, all burned up, just bare rock, basically. The top of it was like a mountain, like a Swiss mountain lake kind of thing, where it was one that went off like a zillion years ago, and now it's like this beautiful mountain lake. And then there was one somewhere else that was like also went off like when dinosaurs were around, and like it's like this ginormous crater that's like super green and lush and beautiful. I don't remember which islands we were on. There's like maybe 11 islands or something, 7 islands. I can't remember how many islands. Anyway, that's a really nice place. I've been to 49 out of 50 states.
Hey.
Oh, which is the one that you haven't been to?
Hawaii. Yeah.
Oh.
I haven't been to Hawaii yet.
What did you go to Alaska for?
Actually, my ex-wife's, she had a music festival gig there.
Oh, nice.
And so we all went up because it was like, when are we ever going to go to Alaska? Let's go. And so we all went. This was probably 4 years ago. And we took my daughter, so she was like 2 years old, like running around Alaska, or 3. No, she must have been 3 by then. But anyway, it was really fun and beautiful. It's like, looks like a textbook, you know, pretty amazing.
So I imagine that you've gotten like a little bit of a glance, at least, over a lot of the music scenes. What can you talk about what you like or dislike about the New York music scene?
I don't think I not like anything. It's fun. It's good. It's gonna be weird coming back from this whole thing. I don't know what that's gonna be like. It's probably gonna be slow starting back. I hope all the clubs make it through. That is also probably worrisome to some. The jam session thing was amazing. It was a lot more of that going on when I first moved here than is now. Cleopatra's Needle closed a couple months ago, 6 months ago maybe. That place used to have a great jam session. Danny Kirkham used to take me around to all the jam sessions. Him and Julius Tolentino and Jeremy Pelt, they were buddies, and they would, I'd come there and hang out with those guys and play tunes with them. I don't think there's that much of that left. It's like Smalls is still there, and Fat Cat is still there, and a couple places in Brooklyn. But I mean, if you can get one of those started, get one started. Like, that's where you also learn how to do a lot of this stuff, is to actually go to a jam session. That was another thing. One of my students had never really gone outside of the school. And I was like, look, man, go, get out of the school, go to a jam session. And you have to try this thing in front of people. And either it's going to go well or it's going to go bad. And if it goes bad, then you're going to have to do it better the next time and figure out another way to do it or whatever. And you learn all the songs that way. Well, not that way, not all of them, I guess. But the jam session thing, it would be cooler if there were more places that had them. So
you're pro jam session. You like jam session.
I'm pro jam session.
Okay. Awesome. I know a lot of bass trombonists in general, when they're coming into the city, it terrifies them, like the idea of the jam session.
Right. Well, it kind of should, or something. Like, that's a funny part of it. Like, it terrified me too. I remember, so I was talking about Danny Kirkham. He's a good trombone buddy of mine. I got him a job. We were both working at Colony Records, which is a record store, a really world famous record store that used to be in Times Square. It's not anymore. That was like my first job in New York City. You have to get a day job when you move here sometimes to like make your rent and everything. And so I worked at Colony Records, and I got Danny a job and another trombone player named Rodney Lancaster, and we were all working at this record store, and it closed at midnight, I think, or maybe 1 a.m. I can't remember. And then we would go to the sessions after that. Danny would be like, hey, let's go up to Cleo's or whatever. So usually our routine is we'd leave work, we'd stop at 81st Street, which is the Natural History Museum subway stop, and we'd play for like an hour or half an hour or something just to get warmed up and ready to go. And that particular subway stop, there's nobody after the museum closes. Kind of in a wealthy neighborhood, not a lot of people are using the subway, comparatively speaking, and the museum is closed, so there's no reason to go to that particular area or something, unless you live there, I guess. So we would go there, and we'd be relatively alone, and he'd be teaching me tunes, or we'd be doing honk exercises or whatever, and then we would go to the sessions after that, because his buddies it was usually Julius, I think, maybe ran the session. I can't remember how it worked. At any rate, this is going back 20 years or something, but I think that's kind of how it worked. And anyway, we would go there, and I was those guys kicked ass, and I was like barely scratching the surface, but I was like, all right, I'm gonna keep going, and I'm gonna keep getting beat down, and there you go. I think I'm pro jam session. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
As scary as they are. That's amazing.
Well, as scary as they are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We
much.
really appreciate this. Has been so much fun. You had so much great stuff to say.
All good.
And
thank you guys for doing this too. It's really awesome that you're doing this. If it was regular, and it's even more awesome that you're doing it now during the whole thing. It's an excellent, cool thing.
Thank you so much.
It's been good for
Thanks
us
for having me.
Having some kind of thing to keep up with every week.
Yeah.
So
keep kicking butt.
Yeah. And for anybody who would like to read more about Mr. Seigel, look at his discography, or get in contact with him, of course, you can go to maxseigel.com to learn more.
Which only works if you have Flash, by the way.
So get Flash.
Oh, hey.
Get Flash.
By the way, hey, wait, go back to that page and see if you can scroll down the link thing and see if it works. The actual trombone laying there, we used to have this thing where it like went out in position with, it was like a geeky internet thing, but anyway.
Oh, that's cool.
And then if you clicked on it, the whole trombone jumps off the table, and you go through the whole trombone and come out the other end.
Wait. Okay, I don't know what you mean, but we're about to find out. Can you tell me what you mean by that? Like.
So go over to the home link.
Okay, we're home.
And then go down. Whoa!
Oh!
And then if you scroll down from the other links, the slide goes out.
Oh my gosh, that's
That's
Oh,
so
that was so
good.
much fun to
dope.
build. But oh well.
Okay, well it works. Everybody go to the site. That's killing. I'm glad
Goofy.
that
All
we
right.
did that.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
All right,
So
you all.
thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
having me.
for your time.
Thank you.
See everybody next week. Bye.
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 Oh, he hung up already. He was like, bye. Okay, all right. We're done.